This is a great one. I get asked this all the time at work.
You?
Yeah,
okay.
often. So when I'm fitting people, I have a TV going with some racing. It might be the Giro at the moment, or a one-day race or something. And the TV serves to distract people so that they don't think about their pedal stroke.
Okay.
Which is really important when I'm fitting them. And we'll often see someone on there, and I'll say, look at this guy. He's dropping his right hip. His knees closer to the top tube on one side, and he's externally rotating one foot. That's what you do. And I'll point out, pros, most of them look pretty good on a bike, but occasionally you get a shocker, right? Now, the critical thing here is to define what do you mean by worst position? What I would say is...
You're going to say Chris Froome, aren't you?
Oh.
Because that's everyone's thinking of it.
No, I know why Froome's seat looks so low.
Okay.
It's because he's like me.
Heel
he's
dropper.
An epic heel dropper. He needs to run his seat really low to get proper hamstring engagement. It'd be interesting to know, if we could talk to Chris, whether someone's actually ever made the quantum leap of pulling his cleats back another 20 mil on the shoes, like I've done. Like, my cleats are near midfoot, and that's the only way I can combat the heel drop and engage my hamstrings properly. Given how much trouble he's had with his seat height, like if you listen to interviews with him, he's had to drop it really down and just, the bike fitters try and raise it back up, and he's like, no, that's where it stays, because of saddle sores. So he rocks when his seat's too high. But it'd be great if we could ever sort of test him with a really rearward cleat position, like get the center of the cleat 40 or 45 millimeters behind the ball of his foot, because I reckon he'd start to be able to raise his seat a little bit.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's for me. Now, I don't think his position's that weird. He does look a bit gangly and awkward, but he's a classic ectomorph. He's got big long limbs and a barrel chest and pencil legs, so he's always going to look a bit funny on a bike. A bit like Ryder Hagedal of years gone by, with that kyphotic upper back and round. The guy looked terrible. Multiple Canadian time trial champion. He was a weapon on the bike.
Yeah.
But in terms of like what defines a bad position, what I mean is when the things on the bike are in the wrong place. And it's really obvious that they're in the wrong place.
Okay.
The top of the heap has got to be Annemiek van Vleuten.
Say that name again.
Annemiek van Vleuten.
Okay.
Vleuten?
Yeah.
Vleuten?
Okay.
I never get that right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit like Remco Evenepoel.
Okay.
As Mr. Lantern Rouge would say, Evenepoel.
Yeah.
Or Evenepoel. Or as Robbie McEwen says, Evanderpoel.
Just say Remco.
It's definitely not Evanderpoel because there's no D in it. It's definitely Evenepoel or Evenepoel.
Yeah.
My Belgian accent's terrible. But Annemiek, her seat is catastrophically high.
Right.
Now, Annemiek van Vleuten is a 4-time world champion. She's probably, I don't know, she'd be up there in my top women riders of all time. She's an amazing athlete, an incredible athlete. She is also obviously a very high-level compensator, because if she wasn't, she would be crippled by her saddle height and or cleat position. I'm not sure if it's a problem with the cleats being far too forward on the shoe or the seat being too high, or a combination of both. But we'll try and put some footage in here if we can of Annemiek climbing when she's quite tired. She rocks so badly, and her knee almost extends to full terminal extension at the bottom of the stroke when she's tired. And look, at light load in a bunch, she's a really, when she's rolling at 200 watts or something, she's really good at pointing her toe down and hiding the fact that the seat is too high. But when the load goes up, she just looks, catastrophically unstable. And despite that, has won four world championships. The question would be then, if she's such a great athlete and she's so good, how much better could she be if she had a good position, a good, well-controlled position that held up under heavy load? And that's a great question.
Right.
Basically, bad positions like this, they have to be very far off before you start getting massive effects on power output, like 5-10% loss in FTP, for example. I would call that a massive effect for a trained athlete. Maybe she's still within the zone where she's not getting massive power loss, but it certainly looks very unstable. And I think she would be much more efficient if someone lowered her seat and potentially pulled her cleats back a bit, because she does, under heavy load, drop her heels a lot, and hence the rocking and rolling. And there was a classic scene in Liège-Bastogne-Liège where Annemiek was chasing, I think it was Reusser, the SD Works rider.
Yep.
And Reusser is solid as a rock. Her upper body's stable. She's got perfect control of the bottom of the stroke. She's barely moving, tempoing along. And Annemiek is just monstering the bike just all over the place. And it was really interesting to see that juxtaposition of the two positions. So look, despite all that, she's a 4-time world champ. So who am I to say that she's wrong? But as a guy who deals with biomechanics all the time, that is, I think, the worst position of the pro peloton.
What's your hypothesis with pro riders having poor positions and staying in those poor positions? But surely they have fitters there that are willing to help them. Is there a reason why you think they stay in that same position?
Yes.
Okay.
So my experience talking to professional athletes is this is going to ruffle some feathers when I say this, is that they do not listen to people like me.
Right.
These people ride 500 to 800 kilometres a week. They've been riding forever. They know their position. They have a place where they want to be, and someone they might be sponsored by a fitting company or something, and that company might come along at the start of the year and there's a photo shoot. Oh, here's such and such having his position refined by the master fitter, who they're sponsored by.
Retool.
Yeah, whoever it might be. Yeah. And then that guy will go home and change everything back to how it was before. They don't listen to people like me. They have their own favourite position and they use it. And that's been my experience, is that they'll make some tiny change, but not something like that.
Yeah.
So it's bizarrely, it's probable in my experience with pro athletes that someone has probably said, hey, we should lower your seat. And Annemiek's gone, I'm a 4-time world champion in this position.
So
yeah, shove it.
Yeah.
And that's
which makes sense. Like when you think about it logically, I'm winning races, so why, if it ain't broke, why fix?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's been my experience, is that the reason that most pro athletes, pro cyclists look so great on a bike, and most of them do, right, is not because of people like me fixing their positions. It's because they have come to that position over time, and that's how they like to be, and they are all high-functioning, symmetrical, powerful people with great genetics. Because the pro peloton filters those people out who aren't like that. Yeah. So by the time you get to that level of the sport, they're all pretty good. Now, we should have an honourable mention. It would be remiss of me if I didn't mention Domenico Pozzovivo.
Okay.
So, look, Pozzovivo, it's not his fault. The position is not sort of terrible, but the guy looks monstrous on a bike, right? He was born with genu varum, which is basically a really heavily bowed tibia shape. So the guy's got like bowed legs, right? The opposite of knock knees. And because his legs are shaped like that, when you stick him on a bike and you pull his feet really close together, he squirrels and rotates on a bike. His pelvis moves in a massive figure of 8 like this, and he just looks out of kilter. He looks really terrible. And I think also Domenico, I think he broke his pelvis in a crash a couple of years ago, which then made it worse, which certainly didn't help. Now, despite that, again, multiple top 10 finisher in multiple Grand Tours. The guy's a really good rider, but he looks very awkward because of the shape of his legs. Now, that is not necessarily a positional problem, but it certainly looks messy on a bike. So I'll give Domenico an honourable mention. And I should say that these two riders are some of I love watching these guys ride, and I'm certainly not criticising them in any way. But from a biomechanical standpoint, Annemiek's first and Domenico's second. But mostly that's not his fault. It is just his body. Yes. He's made the best out of what he was born with. Yeah. So those are my top twos. And look, maybe we can forward this through to Annemiek and pull the seat down, or maybe I'll just get lots of hate mail and say, you're wrong. Yeah. 4-time world champion and one of my favourite riders ever. She rides like she's so good, and she's such an attacking, spirited rider. I love watching her ride, but every time I see her go up a hill at the end of a race, I think someone's got to pull that seat down.
Yeah.
Who knows? But that's been that. Those are the two, and we'll see. We'll see if anything comes out of that.
Thanks, mate.
Probably not.
Yeah, thanks.